Welcome to part 2 of You Ask For It. Now, the question for today is really a question that is asked by people outside the church. And what I mean by outside the church is those people who watch and listen to anyone that, quote-unquote, is inside the church. And based on what they're hearing and based on what they're seeing from that Christian, they make a decision. They make a decision if they want to be a part of it at all. And that's why the question is this. If Jesus is so awesome, why are so many Christians hypocrites? If Jesus is so awesome, why are so many people hypocrites? We ask questions similar to this in other areas, truthfully. It's not just confined to just Christianity. We do this all the time. For instance, we will ask the question about the school our children attend. And we may see something at a school, and we say, I don't want my child to be a part of that. And so we will maybe even choose where to live based on the school. We see it in the Wiregrass. People move to different places around the Wiregrass so they can get in a certain school. Where I grew up, over in Mobile area, number of people didn't want to be in the Mobile school system, so they moved over to the Eastern Shore. So we see it all the time there. It's relevant everywhere. People make those decisions based on what they see and observe about what's coming out of a certain school or a certain school system. Okay? But we also see this attitude in other places as well. We will say things like, I will never be a part of that political party because what we see them saying and doing. I will never cheer for that particular team because of what that team stands for. I will never watch that TV show because of that actor or that station or whatever. I will never watch that news program because of how they present things and their commentaries and their beliefs. We make the same decision about personalities and radio personalities. We do it all the time. We do it with our music. We choose what albums to buy and who to listen to and what concerts to go to based on something that artist said or did, or sometimes even what that artist said, didn't say, or didn't do. Okay? So it's not unusual for us as people to make decisions based on what we observe and based on what we see and hear from other people. Okay? For instance, we watched as a country how socialism was ran in the USSR. And we made a decision just by observation that we didn't like that. No matter what you think of the song by the Beatles, we didn't like USSR. And we didn't want any part to do with socialism. Okay? At least that's what the majority of us thought for years and years and years. But truthfully, the advertisers and social influences are banking on us making decisions based on them, based on what they say and what they do. So we do this all the time. So the question for today, again, is it really a big deal if Christians are labeled and some people are turned off? And they're turned off away from Jesus because of us. And then the short answer is yes. Yes, that is a big deal. Because it doesn't matter what you can choose a different team, you can choose a different political party, you can choose what radio personality to listen to. That's not going to affect your eternal life. But being a Christian, choosing Jesus, that is a big deal. Jesus made a big deal out of eternity. Jesus made a big deal about our lives here impacting what comes next, what comes in our next life. He made a big deal out of that. He was pretty serious. So when he was serious about this, he had an emphasis on the church, because the church was the place he had the biggest problem. That was Jesus' biggest problem when he was actively preaching and teaching and leading. The church was a huge problem. And the church is where he found people called hypocrites. Here's what Brennan Manning said. Brennan Manning said this: "The single greatest cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips, then walk out the door and deny him with their lifestyle. This is what the unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable." And what Brennan is doing here is he's describing a hypocrite. That's really what he's doing. And the biblical definition, really, this is what he's doing. This is a person who appears one way, but that is really not who they are. That's a persona, but it's not actually who they are. When you think about actors today, you think about people like William Shatner. You know, for many of us, William Shatner will always be Captain Kirk. Leonard Nimoy will always be Spock. Okay? You know, for my money, Harrison Ford is either going to be Indiana Jones or Han Solo, right? Arnold Schwarzenegger will always be the Terminator. Sylvester Stallone, in my mind, will always either be Rambo or Rocky. And I don't care how many movies Henry Winkler has been in, he's still Fonzie. But we know that that's not really them. But we have this picture of them. We have this mental picture of this character, and that's always how we remember them, and that's sort of the lens that we see them through. And what Jesus is really talking about is people who are playing a part that is not really them, but they're playing this part making you believe that it is really them, and it's not. That's what he's talking about when he's talking about being a hypocrite. And for Jesus, the poster children for being a hypocrite are the people called the Pharisees, the professional church folk. That's who he's talking about here. Now, the Pharisees were, truthfully, were supposed to be examples of what it meant to live a life of following God, of living for God, the living God's way. And I got to be honest with you, if we just sort of time warped back before Jesus' time, before he started teaching and preaching, if we just time warped back there and dropped in to that culture, we would probably want to be like a Pharisee. In fact, Philip Yancey said, if given the choice during this period of time, he would have chosen to become a Pharisee. That would be the life that he would have chosen. So if you wanted to be a person who was religious, you would look to the Pharisee. That's the person that you would say, I want to be like that. Because listen, these guys, they fasted twice a week. I have a hard time fasting 3 hours, okay? But these guys fasted twice a week. They did it on Monday and Thursday, which sounds okay with me because Burger King has Whopper Wednesdays, so that would work with me. But the Old Testament only called for one time a year fasting. But these guys, twice a week, that these guys did this. These dudes also gave a tenth of everything they had. Not just tenth of quote-unquote income of finances that came in. We're talking a tenth of everything. If they got anything, a tenth of that they would give. They would give back. Okay? So they were meticulous in this. Okay? That we also know that the Pharisees, by and large, lowered their standard of living. They actually were a little more uncomfortable in their living environment because of some decisions that they had made. And that they chose to do that. They were actually admired in the community. They were supporters of the community. And Jesus couldn't stand them. Jesus couldn't stand them. He had nothing but disdain for these group of men. Okay? Now, he had 30 years of watching them. He had 30 years of observing them and of hearing them, being around them. So it wasn't like he just saw one bad egg or one rotten apple in the bunch. He saw the whole thing. He understood, based on his observation for 30 years or so, that this was systemic. This was systemic. And he was very harsh in his criticism. And we find in Matthew 23, and he goes into some detail. I'm going to highlight a few of those for us today. A few of the things that he had against the Pharisees. He said this: everything they do is done for people to see. Again, he's referencing in this chapter is the Pharisees. Everything they do is done for people to see. So yes, they fasted Mondays and Thursdays. Great. But what they did is they dressed the part so that when they were walking around in public, people would know they were fasting based on what they did and how they dressed and how they presented themselves. When they gave, there was most likely a public place where you could drop stuff in. And Jesus told a parable about that one time, told a story about that. So my hunch is that these guys did that as well. They made it very visible about dropping a huge sum in the pot. Okay, they made it very visible. And we also know that when they prayed, they wanted to make sure that was done in public too, so everybody could see them. Then he said in verse 13 about these guys, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites!" Okay? You shut the door of the kingdom in people's faces. You know what that actually means? You know what that actually means? It means they were making things so difficult that they were putting stuff out there that said, here's the way that you enter the kingdom of heaven. And they were outlining rule upon requirement upon requirement, and there was no way anybody could live up to that. There was no way anybody could, quote unquote, enter the kingdom of heaven based on what they were saying that you had to do. Okay? So that was a big deal. There was no way people were to attain that. And then he talks about the way that they tithe. He said, you give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin. So again, it was more than just, they gave a tenth of everything, right? Not just finances, but the mint, the dill, the cumin. But you've neglected the more important matters of the law: justice, mercy, and faithfulness. So they were meticulous in this giving thing, but when it came to dispensing mercy and justice, it looked like they probably only dispensed that about a tenth of the time, if you want to know the truth. And then he said this in verse 23, you should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You should have been giving 90% justice and mercy and not just the 10%. It's more about the justice and mercy in the church. He was reminding them of this. And then in verse 28, in the same way, on the outside, you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside, you're full of hypocrisy and wickedness. So Jesus really ends this deal, this whole woe passage, by telling them that he's looking at their heart. He's looking at their motives, and it was really, they were all about people noticing them, people admiring them. There was a hint of pride, no, not just a hint, it really was a pride deal for these folks. And he goes right at them and said it's not really about what you're doing, because I know what your heart is all about. And if you read chapter 23, he doesn't mince words, because he calls them snakes, brood of vipers, and truthfully, he basically says, you're condemned to hell. So he obviously did not like these guys much at all. Now Paul sort of describes the same deal as Jesus in Titus when he's talking sort of about this same thing. He says, they claim to know God, but their actions, they deny him. They are detestable, disobedient, and unfit for doing anything good. And Paul is basically talking about the same thing, talking about the same type of attitude that people had. And I want you to notice and think about this. Paul is not talking about people doing bad things. He's not talking about them using bad words or watching the mature audience movies or anything like that. He's saying the same thing that Jesus told the Pharisees. He said, those who claim to be in a relationship with Jesus but act differently. That's the claim, and that's the root of all this. And that's the root of the question that people will have to us. If Jesus is awesome, why are so many people acting this way? Because that's really what it is. People claiming to know Jesus, but acting in a way that you go, really? Really? Do you know him? So when Jesus comes on the scene during this day, he turns the church upside down. He turns this on its head and lets them know that this is not the way that God had intended this relationship to be. And ultimately, because Jesus turned the church upside down, that's ultimately why he was killed. Okay? So here's what I want you to remember, though. Here's what I want you to remember, particularly as it pertains to the hypocrites and hypocrisy in the church. Okay? Christianity's relevance doesn't depend on how Christians act. I hope you realize this. Okay? The reason Christianity has survived for 2,000 years is not based on people gathering in worship settings. It's not based on people going to other countries and starting new countries. It has thrived because Christianity is about Jesus. Now, that doesn't mean that people who follow Jesus can do whatever they want. No, it doesn't mean that at all. Because when I'm dead and gone, when you're gone, when your life on earth is over, Jesus still reigns. Jesus is still alive. But that doesn't excuse us, really, from being hypocrites. But realize this, also, Jesus was not a hypocrite. I'm sure that there's some people out there that will try to claim this, but any Orthodox Jewish person researching and writing about Jesus, any Muslim, traditional Muslim that has been writing and reading and researching about Jesus, and even the 90-year-old church lady talking about, can't find anything about Jesus that they would say he was hypocritical about. You can't find that. By and large, all the research, all the data or whatever confirms that Jesus was who he said he was. And Jesus acted the same way with a couple of guys in the garden as he did with thousands of people on the hillside. He acted the same way in a private room with a young girl that was dead, and he was raising her from the dead, as he did in public walking down the street. It didn't matter. Because why? Because Jesus, we know, is God incarnate, and God's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So Jesus wasn't a hypocrite. And then also know this: hypocritical behavior on a large scale does not invalidate Christianity. And you know, it's there. It's there on a large scale. All you got to think about is the Crusades. You think about the Spanish Inquisition. You think about England and the United States slaveholders. You think of Jim Jones. You think of David Koresh. You think of things like this. In the global scheme, that's really a small sample size on a global scale, truthfully. Bad looks, yes. They all claim to be Christians. Yes, I know that. They claimed everything that they were doing was in God's will. But that doesn't invalidate Christianity. And yes, I know that there has been pain caused by spiritual leaders. And we're more familiar with them, obviously, here than we are around the world. But we're familiar with them in some traditional churches. We're familiar with them in other local pockets of churches. You get the stories. of the spiritual mentor, the spiritual leader, abusing their power, taking advantage of children and women and just other places. And we know the pain. We know the disappointment that has caused. Okay? And that's the legitimate reason why somebody would question, if Jesus is so awesome, why are you acting like this? If Jesus is so awesome, why are you doing this? And many have walked away from God because of that. But that does not invalidate Christianity, though. So we have a challenge. What do we do? What do we do? Well, here's what we must do. We point people to Jesus. Pretty simple. It's all about Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. He never messes up. He never gets stuff wrong. He shows us what a perfect life is like, and it means loving God perfectly and loving each other perfectly. That's what we strive for. That's what we should be doing. But at the same time, we have to realize this. We are Jesus' hands and feet. There's a reason Jesus called men to himself, his disciples. That's the reason he chose the 12 that ended up being 11, then 12 again. There's a reason, because he needed them. Because it was through him that the gospel was multiplied. It was multiplied not because of what they did, but because of who they represented. They represented Jesus. They were the ambassadors. They were the ones that were going out in different places. But what were they doing? They were pointing people to Jesus. But Jesus needed them because he was going to be gone. He was going to be gone, and he knew that they could do greater things with him gone. And he is doing greater things through you and I. The first time a person most likely will see Jesus is through you and me. So we have to realize that. We have to realize we are his hands and feet, which means we must do this. We have to let God increase and we must decrease. We have to let God, through his Spirit, start working and moving in our lives. Understand that it's about Jesus. And the more we let God guide and move in us, the more people will see Jesus and the less they'll see of us. It's less about me, more about God. Less about me, more about Jesus. Less about what I'm doing, more about what God is doing. And here's the danger for us as we seek to live this out, as we seek to be the hands and feet, to be the people that others can catch a glimpse of Jesus. Our danger is this. When looking good overrides our desire for relationship with Jesus, the end result is fake faith. When we're worried about looking good, because we are. There are times we got to look good so Jesus will have a good first impression. If they're seeing Jesus for the first time through us, they need to have a good first impression. And when looking good overrides that, you know what? People can see right through that. People can see right through that. Old movie, 1947, a clip from Gentleman's Agreement. Watch this.
I want to ask you something. And I want you to answer me honestly.
Go ahead.
Do you think I'm anti-Semitic?
No, Kathy, I don't.
Phil does.
Does he?
You know I'm not anti-Semitic. You're a Jew and you know it. Why can I make it clear to everybody but Phil? Why, I was the one who suggested the series. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
I hate this thing just as much as he does. Why can't he see it? Why? Why, tonight at dinner, a man told a vicious little story, and I was ill. I was sick with rage and shame. But Phil actually
What
makes
kind of story, Kathy?
Oh, it was just a story. It had nothing to
Well, suppose you tell me anyway.
Well, it was just a vulgar little joke that a man told at dinner. It has nothing to do
Well,
with
take
this.
it easy, Kathy. Maybe it has. What kind of a joke? I can take naughty words, you know.
But why? Oh, all right. It was a man named Lockhart, and he tried to get laughs with words like kike and coon, and I despised him and everybody else at
What
the
did you
table.
do, Kathy, when he told the joke?
What do you mean?
I mean, what did you say when he finished?
I wanted to yell at him. I wanted to get up and leave. I wanted to say to everyone at that table, why do we sit here and take it when he's attacking everything that we believe in? Why don't we call him on it?
And what did you do?
I just sat there. I felt ashamed. We all just sat there.
Now, isn't that us much of the time? We believe we ought to do something, but we don't. We have it in our mind, but we never take action. We know that we should act a certain way, that we know that we should do a certain thing because of who we serve, of Jesus, and we do nothing. We do nothing. And all we do is think about what we should have done. There's a side note to this movie, because this movie was pretty hard to cast because of this theme of the anti-Semitic theme that it was addressing that was going on in our country. 4 of the actors in this movie who chose to be a part of this movie basically signed their papers to say we're not going to be able to work in Hollywood anymore. 2 of them technically were blacklisted because they chose to take a stand and come out in support of the Jewish people and the harassment that they were being that was going on during this time. Okay, the one actor that sort of survived this in this movie was actually Gregory Peck, and some people believe that because of his involvement with this one, he was actually had it within him to do the next movie 15 years later, I believe, To Kill a Mockingbird, which also dealt with controversial issues. Anyway, so these actors actually put themselves out there. And for 2 of them, it literally blacklisted them. And for the others, it took them many years to quote-unquote get back in the business. Now, I'm getting ready to read from Romans chapter 7. And here we have Paul addressing something that I believe is crucial for us to understand about ourselves. Because I believe what Paul is doing here is the battle that we have to look good to people. And I think Paul had some part of this going on in his life. Because he said this, "For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do, this I keep doing. I find this law at work. Although I want to do good, evil is right there with me." And that's our battle with the world. This is where we all live. And this is what the people see. People see in us this battle. And this battle, because we are hurt people. We all are hurt people. And you know what happens? Hurt people hurt people. And we know that. We realize that. We live that every day. So we shouldn't be surprised when Christians let people down. We shouldn't be surprised that people will label us as hypocrites because we have this battle. We all are battling this. You know what, Christians really are people who need to say, "I'm sorry" a lot. That's who we are, because we face the battle just like Paul is describing. We face this battle every day. He said this, "What a wretched man I am. Who will rescue me from this body that is subject to death? Thanks be to God who delivers me through Jesus Christ our Lord." And folks, this is the message that we have. This is what we can build relationships around, that we can build churches around. Because yes, Jesus loathes hypocrisy, but he has limitless grace for a sinner in need of forgiveness. Do you know a hypocrite? Maybe you're watching with one right now. Maybe you're actually thinking about one right now. Maybe you're thinking, "Yeah, I am one. I am one." You know, Paul said, and I think Paul speaks for a lot of us when he says this, "In me, the worst of sinners, Christ Jesus might display his immense patience as an example for those who would believe in him and receive eternal life." Paul knew that he had a daily battle to face. We have a daily battle to face. And that's why I think the writer of Proverbs nailed it when he said this. Whoever conceals their sins does not prosper. But the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy. That's a great word for us, for those of us inside the church and those of us outside the church. Because this is the answer to our battle problem. And this is our answer to being labeled a hypocrite. Yes, I am. But Jesus can deliver me, and He can deliver you too. Jesus said, when we follow Him, we become more like Him. We live more like Him. We care more about what He cares about. We learn to love God more. And we learn to treat each other better as well. So sometimes when you see Christians acting in a way that looks hypocritical, it's a great reminder that is exactly the people Jesus came for. It's exactly the people Jesus came to help. You know, we don't always practice what we preach, but I hope we want to. I hope we want to. Christians are people who need to say, I'm sorry, when they mess up. Christians are people who ask Jesus for forgiveness and ask Him to help us every day to live more like Him. I want to close our time with a prayer. And this prayer is not mine. It's from the Psalm. And may this be your prayer today and every day going forward. Search me, God. Know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Jesus, you are awesome. Now let me live in a way that shows people exactly that. God bless you. Have a great week.